Hey, honey, how are you? Last week, we talked about the it is what it is philosophy, a way by which to open our hands and our hearts to whatever this life may bring our way. But this acceptance must also come with a self-aware humility. The kind of humility that knows to take notice of the slightest hint of arrogance and talk sense back into itself. Because how can we accept life as it actually unfolds if our unexamined pride continues to tell us that we can resist the change? And even worse, if we continue to believe it. It is humility that gently, although sometimes not so gently, keeps us in check of the fact that we are but mere human beings, finite and limited. But still, we are so capable and so responsible. And in case you needed the fact to be spelled out for you today, let me do the honors. You can plan and dream and work hard and exert your maximum effort, and still, life will unfold in whatever way it wants to. All the time we hear about people who eat the healthiest foods and exercise regularly, and they still get diagnosed with fatal diseases. People who work 12 hours, 6 and 7 days a week still find themselves scraping for sustenance at the end of the month. And of course, my personal favorite, people who spend years and years praying and preparing their hearts and minds for happy and healthy marriages still find themselves alone with a divorce certificate and a maimed and traumatized heart. You see, the math just doesn't always add up, and we cannot count on the math to add up. And yet somehow, still, we are responsible. We are responsible because we can control one thing: our response to the crazy and unpredictable life, painful and taking us by surprise as it may be. How do we show up to our circumstances when they make absolutely no sense? How do we show up with pen and paper when the math just isn't mathing? Today's conversation will help us dig into one of the most necessary tools we must all store in our arsenals so that we can own our agency over that one thing that is within our grasp, so that we can prepare our hearts and minds and lives for whatever may come, knowing that we will arrive at the scene with integrity. So, without any further ado, let's begin today's conversation. Hey guys, how are you? I hope you guys have had a wonderful week so far. I know it's just Tuesday if you're listening to this on release day. But yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I kind of called you honeys at the start of this episode. And I just have decided, I've made this decision I'm going to refer to all my online friends as honeys because I am Bibishay, and this is the Being Allowed podcast, and everything that I do has B in it, stamped on it, so it just makes sense, okay? And you guys are also sweet, and you've always been so supportive, so I think calling you honeys is pretty, I don't know, it just makes sense. If you guys have listened to last week's episode, you will already kind of have like a background on what it is that we're going to talk about today. If you haven't, I will link last week's episode in the description below, in the show notes below. Definitely go back and listen to it so that you can join the conversation and, think about this in a more whole way. Because today we kind of take off where we left off last week, talking about acceptance, this concept of accepting that life will not always happen our way. We will not always have control over the details of our lives or the way that things unfold. Where life will continue to throw curveballs at us up until the moment we die. I think I don't remember ever hearing anyone that I know or anyone, online or in a movie or أي حاجة mentioned that they lived and died, without having at least one curveball thrown at them. Sometimes the curveballs are giant and sometimes they're a lot more manageable. But in whatever season you're in, you're definitely going to come face to face with things that were not expected and things that don't make sense given the amount of work and the amount of effort that you put into avoiding that thing. Life just has like an absurd and, in my opinion, quite hilarious way of serving us hands that we didn't like prepare for. And how can we accept that? Last week we talked about why we should accept that and why that is an extremely liberating and anxiety relieving way of living. This week I just wanted to talk to you guys about one of the tools that I believe are crucial and essential when it comes to acceptance, making acceptance more practical. Because خلاص الأسبوع اللي فات we talked about how ماشي we should accept, like مفروض ان احنا نقول it is what it is. And we talked about how obviously مش هحرق لكم الحلقة كلها if you haven't listened to it, because I really do recommend that you go back and listen to it. بس انه دي مش حاجة سلبية ان احنا نقول it is what it is. دي مش حاجة سلبية خالص، بالعكس دي حاجة قوية قوي، حاجة مليانة agency over انه اوكي الحياة بتديني حاجة فانا اقدر استقبل الحاجات اللي الحياة بتديها لي دي, knowing very well that I'm not God. I am a very limited human being. I can't control my circumstances. The one thing we can control is our response to our circumstances. And today we talk about one of the most crucial ways by which we should control our responses to the circumstances. And that is, drumroll please, mindfulness. Now, we hear the word mindfulness thrown around left and right في كل حتة online. كل حاجة بتقولك mindfulness يعني ما أعرفش, بحس إن أنا بشوف الكلمة دي في كل حتة قوي. بس what is mindfulness? Let's try to understand. I did some research عشان أعرف officially what the official definition is. ولقيت إنه في الأكسفورد definition, mindfulness is a mental state achieved by focusing on one's awareness on the present moment, while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. It is used as a therapeutic technique. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is a state of focusing on the present moment. It is a state of accepting the present moment. كتير جدا وبجد اسألوا نفسكم كده, يعني كم مرة بتبقوا ماشيين في اليوم وتحسوا يا دي القرف, يومي مش ماشي خالص زي ما أنا كنت عايزة, كنت حاطة to do list بالهبل ومش عارف ايه, ويا دي القرف طلع لي حاجة, طلع لي مشوار هيبوظ لي اليوم كله, هيلخبط لي النظام اللي كنت حاطاه, وهضطر أغير كل حاجة وبتاع. This is like a very common train of thought بيحصل عادة من غير ما ناخد بالنا أصلا. عايزة أحكي لكم يعني as I'm recording this actually, I'm recording this the night before it's gonna go live, where I have had it planned and I've had it in my to-do list to record it من يوم الخميس اللي قبله. Today is Monday. I have had this planned to be recorded from last Thursday, and it was my every intention. وكل يوم بطلع اللابتوب وأقول yes, I need to do this. This is يعني هيبقى حلو قوي لو أنا I have the episode recorded in advance ومش عارفة ايه. ومش هضحك عليكم لما اقول لكم انه الاسبوع اللي فات كله والويكند اللي فات كله والاسبوع ده لحد دلوقتي have been completely unexpected. كل ما اعمل بلان, كل ما اعمل to do list, كل ما يعني اقرر ان انا هعمل حاجة you know, like I'm gonna do this then this, بجد يطلع لي curveball اكتر من اللي قبله. يخليني الاحظ انه اوكي انا had planned all these things ان هم يتعملوا مثلا باي اخر الاسبوع ولا حاجه منهم خلصت. it is what it is. وهو مش سهل ان الواحد يقول it is what it is, ومش سهل ان انا الاحظ ان طريقه تفكيري استفزت وان انا اقبل ان انا استفزيت بالطريقة اللي المايندفولنس definition ده بيقول لنا نعمله. It's basically an invitation to notice our reactions, notice our responses, and then to not judge them. Let's say واحد كسر عليا وانا سايقة في الشارع. Mindfulness would say, notice that you're angry. أكن اطلعوا برا نفسكم، نطلع برا نفسنا وأكننا بنبص على نفسنا من برا ونلاحظ الشخص ده شكله متعصب إن في حد كسر عليه. We are not judging that person. We're not judging the reaction or the response. We are simply making note of it. فاحنا مش بننفض للإحساس، لا احنا we're validating the feeling. أنا استفزيت الموقف يستاهل إني أستفز، لكن أنا acknowledge that and then I will let it go. Let's say something worse than that happens where I don't know سمعنا إنه حد بنحبه جدا مثلا هيحتاج يعمل عملية أو عمل حادثة أو حاجة، بعد الشر بس these things happen. Mindfulness would say الموقف صعب جدا. My emotions are very much invested. I am not judging myself for feeling extremely sad right now. So I will allow myself to be sad or scared or worried. But then I will let it go. And what that essentially says is أنا واخدة بالي من emotional response أو physical response أو mental response بتاعي تجاه الحاجة. بس I'm also acknowledging إنه my control over it is very limited. والحاجة الوحيدة اللي أقدر أعملها هي إني ألاحظ أنا بفكر إزاي يعني رد فعلي إيه. Because that is when step one happens. once إن أنا لاحظت رد فعلي، لأن العادي هو إن الموقف بياخدنا والحماسة بتاخدنا أو المضايقة بتاخدنا أو whatever بياخدنا وبنندفع وبننفعل من غير ما خالص ناخد بالنا هو احنا حاسين بإيه، هو احنا مندفعين بإيه. and كنت قلت كده في حلقة قبل كده إنه قريت يعني قريت كتاب I will link the episode below يعني عشان we go more in depth يعني about the book. بس كنت قريت كتاب بيقول يعني إنه قبل مثلا العصبية أو قبل الشتيمة أو قبل whatever، ما بين اللحظة اللي بيحصل الحاجة بتخليني عايزة أشتم أو أتعصب وما بين ما أنا فعلا بشتم وبتعصب there is a space. Between the stimulus and the response there is a space. وفي السبيس ده أنا لازم ألاحظ أنا حاسة بإيه، ولازم في السبليت سكند دي اخد القرار انا هتصرف ازاي. والكلام ده كله it seems حلوة قوي on paper بس it's not really practical, it's not really realistic، لان الواحد لما بيتحط في نص الموقف بيندفع على طول. بس انا جاي بقول لكم من واحدة يعني كانت اكتر انسانة مندفعة في العالم، لا you can definitely make progress. This is something mindfulness is training. Mindfulness مش حاجة بتحصل في يوم وليلة أقرر إنه I'm gonna be more mindful. لا دي حاجة بتاخد وقت وبتاخد مجهود، وهنخش أكتر في الموضوع ده دلوقتي. النهاردة now that we understand what mindfulness is كdefinition وكconcept، عايزين نتكلم على how we can practically incorporate mindfulness in our everyday lives. ازاي اروح من ان انا واحدة بتتصرف based on مشاعرها او whatever الموقف بيدعي يعني في اللحظة دي او بيحتاج في اللحظة دي، ليه ان انا واحدة بتلاحظ المواقف اللي هي فيها وبتلاحظ الظروف اللي هي ممكن تتحط فيها مع انها مش حطاها في الحسبان خالص، وبتتصرف بحكمة وبتتصرف بطريقة متزنة اكتر بكتير، فيها mindfulness اكتر بكتير. Now that we understand basically the connection between accepting that it is what it is, that is directly related to mindfulness. And now that we understand the connection there, what are some practical ways we can incorporate this mindfulness into our everyday lives? أول حاجة I want to say is know yourself. دي أكتر حاجة هقولها في حياتي أفتكر، يعني بتهيألي إن لما أموت هيحطوها on my tombstone اللي هو بوبا self-reflection, introspection, know yourself. دي أهم حاجة ممكن أي حد يعملها، دي أهم هدية ممكن أنت تديها لنفسك أو أنت تديها لنفسك. لازم نعرف نفسنا. How do we expect to make progress or to become better people or to show up in the world in a better way if we don't know ourselves? هعرف منين ايه الحاجات المهمة بالنسبة لي، فبتطلع مني ريسبونس عامل ازاي. ما هو انا لازم افهم انا طريقة تفكيري ايه، عشان لما يحصل حاجة الاقي من نفسي اندفاع معين او رد فعل معين ابقى فاهمة that's because انا بفكر بالطريقة 1 2 3، فلما حصل الموقف ده ضايقني بالصورة الفلانية فانا I reacted بالطريقة دي. I think this is the most important takeaway from all of my podcast episodes, all of my online presence. اي حد هيتكلم معايا in person برضو هيلاقيني بقوله لازم نبذل مجهود، ولازم نقضي very intentional very mindful time ان احنا نتعرف على نفسنا، نعرف ايه اللي بيضايقنا، ايه اللي بيبسطنا، ايه اللي بنحبه، ايه اللي بنكرهه، ايه اللي بنتوقعه. This is crucial. Now how can you get to know yourself? Number 1, by journaling with a physical pen and paper. لأن هو في مليون ألف طريقة تانية للjournaling, whether على اللابتوب أو في دلوقتي applications for journaling زي One Day at a Time. It's a great application برضو. I mean, any form of journaling is great, but I always try to say, no, when you take a pen and paper and you actually write down your thoughts or your feelings or your reflections على يوم or whatever, something really magical happens. لأن بيحصل connection كده ما بين الإيدين والمخ، والواحد بيجورنال وبيطلع حاجات يعني ما كانش غالبا عارف إن هي أصلا جواه. I would recommend pen and paper. It's also really great to have, your journal entries من السنين، يبقى عندنا a physical حاجة that we can keep coming back to، نشوف احنا كبرنا ازاي، طريقة تفكيرنا اتغيرت ازاي على مدار السنين وكده. I don't know. I personally really recommend a physical pen and paper. If not, do it your way. But I genuinely believe that journaling is crucial. يعني it is a cornerstone في المشوار بتاع البني آدم إن هو يعرف نفسه. فjournal. حاجة تانية, regularly disconnect from social media, disconnect from the internet, disconnect from your social circles, maybe from your family. Take intentional time, whether that is حاجة regular أكتر، مثلا زي هنقول كل يوم هنزل أتمشى نص ساعة، وده هيبقى الفترة اللي أنا فيها completely disconnected من العالم، وهركز قوي على مخي بيشتغل ازاي وكده. أو لو هتبقى more spaced out, maybe once a week, maybe even once a month, but just make it a very intentional, mindful decision in you're gonna make disconnection a part of your life. This disconnected part هيخليك تواجه نفسك face to face, away from the group, away from the crowd. You're going to be able to see yourself as an individual with your own individual way of thinking that is شوية dissociated من the group أو the whole. So you're going to learn more about yourself. You're going to understand more about your individuality, your uniqueness. And then you're going to be able to come back بقى from this disconnected time as a better person, more well-rounded, فاهم نفسك أكتر، فتعرف أكتر تبقى mindful وتركز وتدisconnect let go و to accept life as it comes بشكل a lot more effective. What happens when we disconnect, or what happens when we journal, is that we get uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable إن إحنا بدل ما نشتت نفسنا كل ما طريقة تفكيرنا مثلا تبقى دوشة قوي أو كده. It's uncomfortable إن إحنا نواجه بقى مثلا عيوب شخصياتنا، لأن the more that we spend time alone, the more that we're gonna come face to face with ايه ده انا فيا العيب ده انا، او مثلا انا غلطت في الموقف ده or whatever. محدش بيحب يتواجه بحاجة زي كده، بس الحقيقة هو ان احنا محتاجين نواجه نفسنا بحاجة زي كده. ف it is uncomfortable. The work of getting to know ourselves, the work of mindfulness عامة، ان احنا pay attention and notice ourselves, and notice our reactions, our patterns, our habits is very uncomfortable. But we need to teach ourselves to get comfortable with discomfort. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's the only way you can grow. دي الطريقة الوحيدة. الواحد لما بيروح الجيم بيفضل يشيل مثلا let's say 5 كيلو، وبعد كده بيحصل انه ايه ده انا محتاجة ابتدي اشيل اوزان اكتر، upgrade لمثلا 7 كيلو. في الاول it's uncomfortable. That is discomfort. Being at the gym, challenging our physical bodies in that way is very uncomfortable, but it is necessary. It's how we become stronger over time. وآخر tool هي meditate. Meditation is great. I personally recommend the app Headspace. I also used the app Calm for what? These are great tools that are like they're guided meditations وبرضو it's very uncomfortable ان انت تقول لي سيبي تليفونك ربع ساعة مثلا الصبح وغمضي عينك و be still بالذات بقى لو انا في حاجات on my mind and there are things شغلاني وكده ان انا اسيب كل حاجة واقعد ساكتة و follow a guided meditation that is uncomfortable but that is what mindfulness requires. Mindfulness requires ان احنا نعود نفسنا to be comfortable with discomfort. When you learn about yourself بقى, the more that you meditate, the more that you go on intentional walks, the more that you journal, بيبقى كأننا بنبص في المراية. كل ما هبص في المراية أكتر كل ما هعرف ملامحي أكتر، كل ما هفهمني أكتر، وكل ما هفهمني أكتر كل ما هعرف احتياجاتي ال very specific هي إيه. What are my particular needs according to my personality, the way that I think وكل حاجة. And when we understand what our needs are, هنعرف which of these needs إحنا نقدر نفulfill لنفسنا. How can I then meet my needs? الحياة is very unpredictable. هيفضل يحصل surprises. لو أنا مش مهتمية بنفسي ومش واخدة بالي من المنتل هيلث بتاعي، مش واخدة بالي من صحة جسمي وصحة عقلي وفكري ومشاعري، يبقى لما الدنيا تحصل I'm gonna be already extremely off balance ومش هعرف show up بالintegrity اللي هيسمح لي أبقى balanced في الظروف الصعبة والظروف الغير متوقعة. فاحنا نعرف نفسنا based on إن المعرفة اللي احنا هنعرفها لنفسنا دي هنعرف ايه احتياجاتنا وهنفulfill these needs. أنا مع الوقت عرفت ايه. for example عرفت ان أنا أبين قوي من بره ان أنا I'm an extrovert وبحب أتكلم وبحب قوي create content and I have a lot to say in general, but the reality of the matter is that I fill my cup alone. Extroverts fill their cups by being in social situations وإن هما يبقوا مع ناس بيحبوهم وكده. أنا for me no matter how comfortable and amazing the social setting is هيجي وقت مش هقدر إن أنا أبقى socially present for people all day every day. بحتاج أخد وقت لوحدي. عرفت الموضوع ده لأني قضيت وقت بحاول أفهم نفسي، بحاول أعرف هو أنا ليه الرياكشنز بتاعتي كده، ليه النهاردة في الخروجة كنت حاسة إن خلقي ضيق كده. قعدت أعمل digging واكتشفت إنه عشان أنا محتاجة أملى كوبايتي وأريتشارج بإن أنا أقعد لوحدي. فدي مثلا حاجات علمتها. فبقيت دلوقتي علشان أعرف show up better ويبقى عندي a more balanced life, I make sure to carve the time alone for myself to fill my cup, do the things that recharge me, refuel me, and reintroduce life into my body and into my mind and heart and brain عشان أعرف show up better وأبقى لما السربرايزز التحفة بتاعت الحياة تيجي أبقى أنا برضو متزنة already، جاية من حتة فيها اتزان. Know yourself and then meet your own needs. أنا قررت إنه في حاجة أخيرة اسمها emergency mindfulness. دي حاجة ولا قريتها ولا أي حاجة بس I came up with this idea of emergency mindfulness. طبعا المايندفولنس اللي احنا قاعدين بنتكلم عليه طول الحلقة اللي فاتت دي is the kind of mindfulness that requires practice, requires يعني هتبقى صعبة شوية في الأول زي بالظبط ما قلنا في الجيم كده، بس مع الوقت جسمنا هيتعود أو مخنا هيتعود وقلبنا هيتعود على إن احنا pay attention ونعرف نفسنا ونلاحظ ردود أفعالنا. طبعا دي كلها practice. بس هنعمل ايه لو في نص مشواري بتاع ان انا introduce mindfulness into my everyday life حصل لي ظرف محتاجني ابقى mindful right this very second عشان انا محتاجة اتصرف right this very second بطريقة مش مؤذية ولا ليا ولا للناس اللي حواليا ومحتاجة ان انا منهارش. That's when emergency mindfulness comes in. Here are the things that I do whenever the life gets too overwhelming and I find myself feeling super anxious وكأن الردود أفعالي برا الكنترول بتاعي تماما. And anxiety is something that lots of you guys have actually asked me about before, and it's something I've been working with my therapist on بقالي سنين وسنين وسنين. I'm gonna tell you just 3 things that actually work for me in the moment, in case you need an emergency mindfulness boost كده in the moment. Number 1, conscious inhaling and exhaling. When you find yourself completely lost in a moment that seems like it's super overwhelming and so much bigger than you, focus on consciously inhaling and consciously exhaling. بجد notice إنه يا لهوي أنا مخنوقة مش عارفة أتنفس, anxiety is too high. Okay, that's a trigger. Pause, inhale fully and exhale fully. And try to make your inhales equal to your exhales. That's the first tool. Number 2, notice your 5 senses in the present moment. Whenever anxiety gets overwhelming بنبقى قوي في مخنا وبنخرج عن جسمنا, وده بيخلينا instead of إن إحنا we're mindful aka we are in the present moment, لا بنلاقي نفسنا رحنا المستقبل بالانكزايتي بتاع يا لهوي what if this happens, what if that happens, blah blah blah, أو بنرجع للماضي ونندم على حاجات حصلت قبل كده. None of these things are accepting. None of these things are saying it is what it is. And it becomes more of a physical thing. When that happens, notice your 5 senses. When you notice your 5 senses, they will bring you back to the present moment. When you feel overwhelmed, say, what can I see? مثلا red car, green car, مش عارفة, tall building. Say all these things. What can I feel? I can feel the steering wheel. طبعا احنا بنقولها كني مثلا سايقة. I can feel الدركسيون, حاسة مش عارفة ايه على رجلي, الجزمة على رجلي. فاهمين قصدي؟ Say, يعني list the 5 senses and say what you're feeling, you're hearing, you're smelling, you're touching, all these things. ده هيرجعكوا into the present moment. وآخر حاجة, if you can, if you're not driving or أو حاجة كده, close your eyes and notice the way by which your body is coming into contact with the space around you. Let's say you're sitting at a desk في المكتب. Notice, رجلي لمسة الأرض, إيدي لمسة الديسك, my back is resting against the chair, all these things. Again, these are all emergency mindfulness tools. هيقدروا يخرجوكوا من momentary anxiety اللي بيحصل فجأة overwhelming كده, لأن الظروف بتكون صعبة جدا ساعات, وهيرجعنا للpresent moment. وطول ما احنا في present moment احنا نقدر نقول it is what it is with acceptance. نقدر ان احنا نكون mindful, whether we use emergency mindfulness or we incorporate mindfulness into our routines in general, and then we can respond to the world around us in a way that is much healthier and with so much more integrity كده, and so much more control over the one thing that we can control, which is our response to the circumstances and to the life around us. The truth is, guys, that over the last few years, life has dealt me some very, very unexpected hands that I did not feel like I was prepared enough to experience or to respond to. واللي حصل انه لقيت نفسي بطلع reactions مش عجباني, مش بترفلكت شخصيتي, مش بترفلكت تربيتي, مش بترفلكت مبادئي, and that really, really crushed me. And it made the real life circumstances that I was put in feel so much bigger and so much more overwhelming. Whereas the thing I actually really, really want to learn to incorporate into my life is this philosophy of it is what it is. And I genuinely believe that the relationship between acceptance, or accepting that it is what it is, the connection between that and mindfulness is key. لأن احنا نعرف show up in a healthy, very productive, very proactive way للحياة, بغض النظر عن هي قد ايه صعبة أو قد ايه unpredictable. I hope you guys found today's episode useful. I know that I personally really needed to hear someone talk about the reality كده. Back when life was hitting me في الأوائل خالص, I think I would have dodged lots of bullets, and I would have avoided making very many mistakes. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, that you found that it was useful or helpful. If you liked it, please like and share, leave a review either on Spotify or on Apple. It always makes a huge difference. And then if you feel like someone else can benefit from اللي احنا اتكلمنا فيه النهارده ده, why don't you forward this episode to someone you know might be dealing with anxiety, or someone who you know might be going through a season of extreme overwhelm? You know, like, sharing is caring. I really do believe that we need to spread more awareness on topics like this. So, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being the wonderful honeys that you are. And I look forward to another chit-chat session this time next week.